Today is Sunday, and that means it's Ghost Stories Day, so I'll be reading from a book on Scottish ghost stories. We'll be right back. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Well, hey everybody, welcome to California Haunts Radio. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. Hello, Native Granny. I'm the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We are 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you think you might have a paranormal need, we can get to you. It might take us a while, but we can get to you. And in the case it does take us a while, we do have mediums who can call you and do a remote read on your house or whatever building you're in. And in most cases, let me push this up real quick. And in most cases, they can calm the energy down and we can get out there. It won't take us more than a couple of days to get out there, though, because, well, you know, California is a big state. But you can always stay in touch with me via phone. I want to welcome everybody. This is Sunday Reading Day. I'm welcoming my audience on TikTok. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to do an intro teaser for this like I normally do. I was involved with the internet. I just got some new internet speeds installed here so we can get some better quality internet going, stuff going out to you guys in the online world. That's what slowed me down today, so everything's kind of last minute for everyone. I even had to push the show up to 6:30. Normally we're on Sundays at 6 p.m. Give you guys an idea of the show. I'm on the air. It's California Haunts Radio. I'm on the air Monday through Friday. And we're going to be adding a Saturday show here coming in. And Sundays are the day that, because we're going to start the week, Sundays are the day that I read from a paranormal themed book. It might be a true story book. It might not be a true story book. But it's just something to do to kind of relax Sunday and drink some coffee or have your dinner and kind of start getting in the mode to hit that work week running, right? Or maybe you're retired, so it's just something to do Sunday night. Maybe you're falling asleep when I read. I don't know. Some people do their laundry. They carry me around their house, So, yeah, so this is what we do every Sunday. But then the rest of the week, we have a lot of different types of shows on, paranormal theme shows. Sometimes we do murder mystery. Tomorrow night, we're going to be doing a different kind of show where we're going to be looking at night sky objects. So I like to change it up. I'm a journalist, photojournalist. So I do like to, change it up a lot. I do have a squeaky chair. I've had this chair for a long time, and I try to save up to get myself a real nice gaming chair, red and black to match my California Haunt stuff. So I'm working on that. For TikTok, I do have a goal up there of 100 night hills. That's going to help me. If you can help me out with that, especially if you like what you see tonight, that would be great. Just like double tap the screen. Show me some love because we're trying to reach 1,000 likes today. So see if we can do that. Okay, now I get my spiel in about Facebook. For those of you watching from Facebook, and I know a lot of you are, please be sure to hit that follow button if you haven't done so already, because we're really looking for followers. And if you like and hear what you see, just like with TikTok, hit that thumbs up button, hit that heart button. I can't do that heart thing with my hand. Just show me some love and show me that you're out there and you're listening. That would be great. You can also make comments in the chat room. I'll try to answer them, but my old eyes just don't see that. Plus, I'll be looking down at a book that I'm reading. But, because the more you do that, the more Facebook computer sees that and moves us out to the World Wide Web to different people to see the show. And that being said, share this show with other people. If you really like the show, like I said, I read from these ghost books every Sunday. If you like the show, please share it out. We're trying to get the word out about our show and get a good following going. I'd really appreciate it. Same thing for YouTube. If you're over at YouTube, I have more than 900 videos over there. Please hit that like button and those smiley faces, and again, comment in the chat room because that helps us get distributed to more people. Twitch, same thing. TikTok, we're over here on TikTok. Be sure to double tap that screen for me. And like I said, I'm trying to reach 1,000 hearts. And I'm also trying to reach, and we probably won't do it today, but it would be nice if I could reach half, even 50 of those night helms. Because what that money is for is to keep me on the air. This is a non, I operate as a nonprofit. This is what I do, and this is how I pay my bills. That being said, I do have a ticker running along the bottom for you guys on Facebook and YouTube, and that's because I had to buy a backup hard drive, and I'm now short $100 to pay my bills this week. And I have till Thursday to make the payment on the internet, or we won't have a show. So if anybody out there could help me, even with $5 or whatever, to start building that up, that'd be great. The address is down on the ticker, so you can do that either over at Venmo or you can do that via PayPal. And for you guys on TikTok, if you want to do any direct donations or anything after today, you're not required to. I'm just saying that would really help me get the bills paid week, because I really, really need to do that. I got to keep this thing going. So you can do that. Go over to my LinkedIn. There's a link to my LinkedIn and my profile, and all the PayPal and Venmo information is over there. I'm just trying to pay my bills this week. Like I said, I spent $100 on a backup hard drive. This laptop here has a 286 gig hard drive. It's not enough room for anything. My other laptop that Microsoft put a download on to update messed up my laptop. That had a 3 terabyte, almost unlimited space over there. But this one fills up real fast. And I already had a backup hard drive on here, and that got full, so I had to buy another one because I couldn't use my computer. So if you guys could help me out with that, again, you could Venmo, PayPal, that would be really great, okay? And again, if you like what you see in here today, please double tap that screen over at TikTok, because I really appreciate it. I'm trying to build my live likes up. And please share this. Please feel free to share this, because, there might be some people that are interested in having a book read every Sunday, So put your fuzzy slippers on, grab your coffee, grab your snacks, grab some popcorn or whatever, and we're going to sit back. I'm going to read for about an hour out of this book. And just as a heads up, okay, for everybody that's coming on that never did this before, I'm on my iPhone over here. I cannot see the screen. So I see your comments, I see you as you're going through, but I cannot really read them. I can barely read that screen over here, to be perfectly honest. So I'm not ignoring you, but I encourage you to listen. This book is really good. The stories in it have been really good so far, and I would appreciate it if you check the book out, okay? Kind of nice to see my body this way on TikTok. I mean, over here, it's like my head's just barely over the top of the screen here because of the positioning. Okay, so we chapter, I lost count, so I don't do Roman numerals, so I'm just going to give you guys a chapter of what we're reading. And again, don't tap that screen over at TikTok if you like what you hear. And I see somebody already sent me a happy heart. Let's see who did this, so I can thank you. My sister. Thank you, sister. Thank you, sister. And like I said, no one's required to donate or anything, but it would be nice because I have to pay my new internet, because I did get new internet to speed this stuff up so we don't have as many drops like we were having. And I have till Thursday, my deadline on my internet, I have to pay it, so I have no choice. But I ended up buying a backup hard drive, or the computer wasn't going to function. All right. That being said, here we go. I'm excited to start this week. We got some great guests lined up this week for the show. For you guys on TikTok, who because I can't go live every night because you won't be able to hear my guests, right? You can visit us 6:30 p.m. Pacific every night, youtube.com/@CaliforniaHauntsRadio. That's where you can find my actual show, and you can watch them live over there if you're interested. Tomorrow night, we're going to have Mark Denatorio. Denatorio has an observatory in Arizona where he has a bunch of really cool telescopes out there. And he has a live thing. I know there's a couple guys that do that on TikTok. He has a live thing where he goes out live and he will explore the heavens with you. And you can look at stuff through his telescopic eye. He's got some really cool cameras, so we're going to be talking to him about that. Okay, without further ado, let me have a little sip of my water here, and away we go. So it's 6:38 p.m. Pacific now. I will be reading until 7:38 p.m. Pacific. I hope. Longer, depending on the size of the chapter. So like I said, for you guys on TikTok right now, that you're going to be hearing a book. So if you want to sit back on your couch and do this, maybe have your dinner, maybe a snack or two, that would be great. Again, if you like what you hear, please double tap that screen. I'm trying to hit that 1,000 mark. And if you feel it in your heart to donate, that would be great, either Venmo, PayPal, or the night sale. Okay? All right. Same thing goes over here. All the addresses are running along the bottom. So, let me let this come up. I had it perfectly set. And I'll bet it just reset me from where I was. It looks like a reset page. Seriously, let's see what happens when I tap it. I just had it set and ready to go too. It's going to be one of the, here we go. Okay, and I want to remind everybody this book was written in the late 1800s, so some of the stuff in here may not jive with how the thinking is today. Please do not turn me into TikTok police or Facebook police or YouTube police or any police like that, because I'm doing my best when I go through this stuff to hit that stuff, beforehand before I say it. But there's times when I'm reading along and I just don't hit it in time. So it may be something offensive to us now, but it wasn't offensive to us back in the 1800s, just to let you know. Okay, so case X to C, whatever that means. And it's not giving us address. It just says house near Blythewood Square, Glasgow, with the haunted. And it's with the, I see Glasgow with the haunted bath. Okay? So here we go. When Captain W. D.S. Smith went to look over Bluck House, there's no name there, we'll call it Ghost House. Ghost House in the neighborhood of Blythewood Square, Glasgow. The only thing about the house he did not like was the bathroom. It struck him as excessively grim. The secret of the grimness did not lie. He thought in any one particular feature, geyser, for example, though there was always something in the look of a geyser when it was old and dilapidated, as was the case with this one, that repelled him, or in the dark drawing cupboard, or in the narrow, slit-like window. But in the room as a whole, in its atmosphere and the general appearance, he could not diagnose it. He could not associate it with anything else he had ever experienced. And please remember that, again, don't turn this into TikTok police or anything like that, okay? I really appreciate it. And these books are out of copyright, so they're public domain. That's another thing, okay? All right. It was with anything else he had ever experienced. It was a grimness that he could only specify as grim with a grimness that made him feel like he should not like to be alone there in the dead of night. It was a nuisance because the rest of the house pleased him. Moreover, the locality was convenient and the rent moderate, very moderate for such a neighborhood. He thought the matter well over as he leaned in the doorway of the bathroom. He could, of course, have had the room completely renovated. New paper, new paint, and a fresh bath. Hot water pipes, too. The geyser should be done away with. Geysers were hideous and pshaw. What nonsense. Ghostly. Ghostly. What absurd rot. How his wife would laugh. That he decided he questioned. His wife. She had expressed a very ardent wish that he should take a house in or near Blythewood Square, if he could get one on anything like reasonable terms. And here was his chance. He would accompany the agent of the property to the latter's office, and the preliminaries should be 6 weeks later. He and his family were installed in the house, which still reeked with the smell of fresh paint and paper. The first thing the captain did when he got there was to steal away slightly to the bathroom, and as soon as he opened the door, his heart sank. Despite the many alterations the room had undergone, the grimness was still there, everywhere. In the fine new 6-foot bath, there we go, with its glistening, gleaming wooden framework, in the newly painted cupboard, in the walls, with their bright fresh paper, in the snowy surface of the whitewashed ceiling, in the air. The very air itself was full of it. The captain was, as a rule, very fond of his bath. But in his new quarters he firmly resolved that someone else should use the bath before he made the experiment. In a very few days the family had all settled down, and everyone, with the exception of the captain, had had a bath. But no matter how many and how bitter were his wife's complaints, try hard as he would, he could not bring himself to wash in the bathroom alone. It was all right, so long as the door was open. But his wife resolutely refused to allow him to keep it open. And the moment it was shut, his abject terror returned, a terror produced by nothing that he could in any way analyze or define. At last, ashamed of his cowardice, he screwed up courage, and with a look of determined desperation in his eyes and mouth, an expression which fits of laughter, set out one night from his bedroom candle in hand, and entered the bathroom. Shutting and locking the door, he lighted another candle and, after placing them both on the mantel shelf, turned on the bath water and began to undress. I may as well have a peep in the cupboard, he said, just to satisfy myself no one is hiding there. For everyone in the house knows how I hate this beastly bathroom, with the intention of playing me a practical joke. Supposing one of the maids, Polly for example, I'm sure she'd be quite capable, took it into her pretty head but here the captain was obliged to stop. He really was not equal to facing, even in his own mind's eye, the situation such as the supposition involved. And, at the bare idea of such a thing, his countenance assumed a deeper hue, and, I am loth to admit, a grin. The grin, however, died out as he cautiously opened the door and peered furtively in. No one, nothing was there. With a breath of relief, he closed the door again, placed a chair against it, and sitting down, proceeded to pull off his clothes. Coat, vest, undergarments. He placed them all tenderly in an untidy heap on the floor, and then, with a last lingering affectionate look at them, walked sedately towards the bath. But was only momentary. The first few steps he walked, but a noise in the grate startling him. He suddenly assumed of the greatest gaiety, and, bowing with mock gallantry to his trousers, he now walked coquettishly to the bath. It was grim, and horribly hot too, for, when he felt the temperature with one of his squat, podgy toes, it made him swear quite involuntarily, turning on the cold water and slapping his thighs playfully. He felt again. Too hot yet. Far too hot, even for him. He loved the heat. More cold, and he was hoisting one chubby leg to feel again, when a repetition of the noise in the grate making him swing round, he descended onto the floor with a very hard bump. For some seconds he lay still, too sulky and aggrieved even to get up, but the draught from under the ill-fitting door, tickling his bare flesh in the most immodest fashion, he roused himself from this and was about to raise himself from the floor when the lights went out without a moment's warning, and he found himself engulfed in the most funereal darkness. To say he was startled is to put it very mildly. He was absolutely terror-stricken, far too terror-stricken to think, now and at least of all, getting up and groping for the matches. Indeed, when he came to think of it, he had not seen any matches in the room, and he had not brought any with him. His wife had flurried him so much. The moment the candles were extinguished, the grimness sensibly increased, and he could feel all around him, thickly amalgamated with the ether, a superphysical presence, at once hostile and horrible. Then, to bring his terror to a climax, there issued from the bath a large rubbing and splashing, as some very heavy person, was vigorously washing. The water rose and fell, squished and bubbled, as it does when one is locked in it, raising and lowering oneself, kicking and plunging first on one side and then on the other. Whilst, to add to the realism, Captain Smith distinctly heard gasping and puffing, and the soft, greasy sound of a well-soaped flannel. He could indeed follow every movement of the occupant of the bath as graphically as if he had seen him, from the brisk scrubbing of body and legs to the finicky process of cleaning the ears and toes. It was whilst the bather was occupied thus that the cupboard door began to open very quietly and stealthily, and Captain Smith heard the chair he had so carefully placed against it being gradually propelled across the floor. Then, something he would have given anything to tell what, came out and began to steal him. He tried to crawl out of its way, but could not. His limbs no longer acted together with his brain. And when he opened his mouth to shout at it, withered away in his throat. It came up to him, and directly it touched his naked skin, he knew it was a woman with a much flounced silk skirt and silk petticoats. A woman whose person was perfumed with violets, a scent for which the captain had a particular weakness, and without doubt, loaded with jewelry. Her behavior did not betray any symptoms of embarrassment when she encountered the captain lying on the floor, but planting one icy cold high heeled shoe on his chest and the other on his cheek, she stepped on him as if he had been an orthodox cushion or footstool, purposefully placed there for her convenience. A hollow exclamation, which died away in a gasp, issued from the bath, as the woman, with a swift movement of her arms, threw something over it. What followed, the captain could only surmise, but from the muttered imprecations and splashes in the water, it seemed to him that nothing short of murder was taking place. After a while, the noises in the bath grew feebler and feebler, and when they found the woman, with a sigh of relief, shook the water from her arms, and, stepping off the captain, moved towards the fireplace. The spell, which had up to the present enthralled the unfortunate captain, was now broken, and, thinking that his ghostly visitor had taken her away, he sat up. He had hardly done so before the darkness was really dissipated, and, to his horror, he saw looking at him, from a distance of only a few feet, a white, luminous face, presumably that of a woman. But what a woman! What a devil! What a man of Satan's male retainers! Yet she was not without beauty. Beauty of the richest sensual order. Beauty that, had it been flesh and blood, would have sent men mad. Her hair, jet black, wavy, and parted in the center, was looped over her shell-like ears, which were set unusually low and far back on her head. Her nose was that of rare and matchless shape termed Grecian, and her mouth, in form, a triumph of all things heavenly in expression, a triumph of all things hellish. The magnificent turn of his short upper lip, and the voluptuous line of its underlip, its sportive dimples and ripe red color, its even rows of dazzling pearly teeth were adorable. They appealed to the senses, and in no sense or shape to the soul. Her brows, slightly irregular in outline, met over the nose. Her eyelashes were of great length, and her eyes, slightly, ever so slightly, obliquely set, and larger than those of living human beings, were black. Black as her hair, and the pupils sparkled, and shone with the most damnable expression of satanical hatred and glee. The whole thing, the face, and the light that emanated from it, was so entirely awful and devilish that Captain Smythe sat like one turned to stone, and it was not until long finished that he groped his way to the door, and in Adam's costume, for he dared not stay put on his own clothes, fled down the passage to his bedroom. From his wife he got little sympathy. Her sarcasm was too deep for words, and she merely ordered her husband, on no account, silliness before either the children or the servants. The injunction, however, which was naturally carried out to the letter, was futile as a precaution, for on running into the bathroom one morning, when everyone else was downstairs, the eldest boy, Ronald, saw, floating in the bath, the body of a hoary-headed old man. Here we go. Do not turn in the police or anything on me, okay? TikTok police or anything like that, okay? It was blood blue, and it had big glassy eyes that stared at him in such a hideous, meaningless manner that he uttered a scream of terror and fled. Alarmed at the noise, most of the household ran to see what had happened. Only the captain remained behind. He knew only too well, and he hid, letting his wife and the servants go upstairs alone. They entered the bathroom. There was nothing in the bath, not even water. But, as they were leaving, they ran into a dark, handsome, evil-eyed woman, clad in the most costly of dresses, and sparkling with jewelry. She glided past them with sly, silent footsteps, and vanished by the cupboard. Cured of skepticism, and throwing dignity to the wind, the captain's wife raced downstairs, and, bursting into the drawing-room, flung herself on the sofa in hysterics. Within a week, the house was once again empty, and the rumor getting about that it was haunted, the landlord threatened the Smythes with an action for, but I do not think the case was taken to court, the Smythes agreeing to contradict the report they had originated. Astute inquiries, however, eventually led them to discover that a lady answering to the description ghost they had seen had once lived at blah house. It's a blank spot. Of Spanish descent, she's young, beautiful, and gay, and was married to a man, an extremely wealthy man. People remembered, in parentheses, people remembered how rich he was after he died, end of parentheses. Old enough to be her grandfather. They had nothing in common. The husband only wanting to be quiet, the wife to flirt and be admired. The neighbors often heard them quarrel, and it was declared that the wife possessed the temper of a fiend. The man was eventually found alive in his bath, and there being no indications of violence, it was generally supposed that he had fainted, as having been previously heard to declare that he often had fainting fits, in parentheses, and had thus been accidentally drowned. The beautiful young widow, who inherited all of his money, left the house immediately and went abroad. And the neighbors were questioned by the Smiths as to whether anything had been seen of her since, shook their heads dubiously, but refused to comment themselves. These are some great stories. Okay, next one is Case XI. Again, I do not read this, so it's Case XI. The choking ghost of Block House near Sandiford Place, Glasgow. If you like what you hear, please tap that screen. I'd really appreciate it. Trying to get the word out about our little show. Show me some love, guys. Show me some love. The last time I was passing through Glasgow, I put up for the night at a hotel near Sandiford Place. I met there an old theatrical acquaintance named Brown, Healy Brown. Not having seen him since I gave up acting, which is now, alas, a good many years, we had much to discuss. Touring days, lodgings, managers, crowds, and other subjects, all included in the vulgar term shop. We spent the whole of one evening debating this in the smoke room, whilst the following night we went to an entertainment given by that charming reciter and raconteur, Miss Lillian North, who, apart from her talent, which in my opinion places her in the first rank of her profession, is the possessor of extraordinary personal attractions, not the least remarkable of which are her hands. Indeed, it was through my attention being called to the latter that I am indirectly indebted for this story. Sorry about that. Miss North has typically psychic hands, exquisitely white and narrow, and her long tapering fingernails and filbert nails, which, by the way, are always trimmed and manicured, are the most perfect I have ever seen. I was alluding to them on our way back to the hotel after her performance, when Healy Brown interrupted me. Talking about psychic things, O'Donnell, he said. No, there is a haunted house near where we are staying. You don't. If I tell you what I know, and you write about it, will you promote, not to allude to the house, by its right number? If you do, there will be the dickens to pay. Simply call it Blah House, near Sandiford Place. You promise? Good. Let's take a little stroll before we turn in. I feel I want a breath of fresh air, and I will tell you the experience I once had there. It is exactly 2 years ago. I was on tour here, in the Green Bushes. All the usual theatrical diggings had been snapped up long before I arrived, and, not knowing where else to go, I went to number Sandiford Place, which I saw advertised in one of the local papers as a first-class private hotel with very moderate charges. A wild bit of extravagance, eh? But then, one does do foolish things, sometimes, and, to tell the truth, I wanted to change. I had digged for a long time with a fellow called Charlie Grosvenor. Not at all a bad chap, but rather apt to get on one's nerves after a while, and he had got on mine horribly. Consequently, I was not at all sorry for an excuse to get away from him for a bit, even though I had to pay dearly for it. A private hotel in a neighborhood like that of Sandiford Place is a big order for an ordinary comedian. I forget exactly what the terms were, but I know I pulled rather a long face when I was told. Still, being, as I say, tired of the usual digs, I determined to try it, and accordingly found myself landed in a nice side bedroom on the second floor. The first 3 nights passed, and nothing happened, saving that I had the most diabolical nightmares, a very unusual thing for me. It was the cheese, I said to myself, when I got out of bed the first morning. I will take very good care I don't touch cheese tonight. I kept this resolution, but I had the nightmare again, and even, if anything worse than before. Then I fancied it. I was at that time a teetotaler, so I took hot milk instead. But I had nightmare all the same, and my dreams terrified me to such an extent that I did not dare get out of the bed in the morning. It was actually then it was winter, till it was broad daylight. It was now becoming a serious matter. An actor, more than most people, needs sleep, and it soon became as much as I could do to maintain my usual standard of acting. On the fourth night, determining to get rest at all costs, I took a stiff glass of hot brandy just before getting into bed. I slept. I could scarcely help sleeping, but not for long, for I was rudely awakened from my slumbers by a loud crash. I sat up in bed thinking the whole house was falling about my ears. The sound was not repeated, and all was profoundly silent. Wondering what on earth the noise could have been, and feeling very thirsty, I got out of bed to get a drink. To my annoyance, however, I groped about everywhere, knocking an ashtray off the mantelpiece and smashing the lid of the soap dish. I could not find neither the lime juice nor the matches. At length, giving up as a bad job, I decided to get into bed again. With that end in view, I groped my way through the darkness, steering myself by the furniture, the position of which was, of course, quite familiar to me, at least I imagined it was. Judge, then, of my astonishment when I could not find the bed. At first I regarded it as a huge joke, and laughed. How rich! Ha ha ha! Fancy not being able to find one's way back to bed in a room of this dimension. Good enough for Punch. Too good, perhaps, now. Ha ha ha! But it soon grew past a joke. I had been round the room, completely round the room twice, and still no bed. I became seriously alarmed. Could I be ill? Was I going mad? But no, my forehead was cool, my pulse normal. For some seconds I stood still, not knowing what else to do. Then, to make one more desperate attempt, I struck straight in front of me and ran into something that recoiled and hit me. Thrilled with amazement, I began to feel what it was, and touched a noose. A noose. A noose, I said, interrupting Hay Brown for the first time since he began. Yes, a noose. He repeated, suspended in midair. As you can imagine, I was greatly astonished, for I knew there had been nothing that I could be now mistaken for a noose in the room overnight. I stretched out my arms to feel what it was fastened to, but, to add to my surprise, the cord terminated in thin air. Then I grew frightened, and dropping my arms, tried to move away from the spot. My feet were glued to the floor. With a gentle purring sound, the noose commenced fawning. I use that word because the action was so intensely bestial, so like that of a cat or snake, round. All right? So it rounded my neck and face. It then rose above me, and after circling furiously round and round, creating a miniature maelstrom in the air, descended gradually over my head. Lower and lower it stole, like some sleek, careless slug. Remember, this is just a book, okay? I'm not talking about murder as far as I can tell, so please do not turn me into the TikTok, Facebook, or whatever police. I'd really appreciate it. Lower and lower it stole, like some sleek, caressing slug. Now, past the tips of my ears, now my nose, now my chin, until with a tiny thud it landed on my shoulders. When, with a fierce snap, it suddenly tightened. I endeavored to tear it off, but every time I raised my hands, a strong magnetic force drew them to my side again. I opened my mouth to shriek for help, and an icy current of air froze the breath in my lungs. I was helpless. O'Donnell, utterly, hopefully helpless. Cold, clammy hands tore at my feet from the floor. I was hoisted bodily up and then let drop. A frightful pain shot through me. 100 wires cut into my throat at once. I gasped, choked, suffocated, and in my mad efforts to find a foothold, kicked out frantically in all directions. But this only resulted in an increase of my torments, since with every plunge the noose grew tauter. My agony at last grew unbearable. I could feel the sides of my raw and palpitating thorax driven into one another, while every attempt to heave up breath from my bursting lungs was rewarded with the most excruciating feeling of pain. Pain more acute than I thought possible for any human being to endure. My head became 10 times its natural size. Blood foaming, boiling blood. Remember, it's a book. Okay. Boiling blood poured into from God knows where, and under its pressure, my eyes bulged in their sockets, and the veins in my nose crackled. Terrific thunderings echoed and re-echoed in my ears. My tongue, huge as a mountain, shot against my teeth. A sea of fire raged through my brain. And then blackness. Blackness inconceivable. When I recovered consciousness, O'Donnell, I found myself standing, cold and shivering, but otherwise sound and whole on the chilly oilcloth. I had now no difficulty in finding my way back to bed, and in about an hour's time succeeded in falling asleep. I slept till late, and, on getting up, tried to persuade myself that my horrible experience was but the result of another nightmare. As you may guess, after all this, I did not look forward to bedtime, and counted the minutes as they flew by with the utmost regret. Never had I been so sorry when my performance at the theater was over, and the lights of my hotel once again hove in sight. I entered my bedroom in fear and trembling, and was so apprehensive lest I should be again compelled to undergo the sensations of hanging, that I decided to keep a light burning all night, and for that reason had bought half a pound of wax candles. At last I grew so sleepy that I could keep awake no longer, and, placing the candlestick on a chair by the bed, I scrambled in between the sheets. Without as much as a sip of spirits, I slept like a top. When I awoke, the room was in pitch darkness. A curious smell at once attracted my notice. I thought, at first, it might be but the passing illusion of a dream. But no. I sniffed again. It was there, close to me, under my very nose, the strong pungent odor of drugs. But not being a professor of smells, nor even a humble student of physics, I was consequently unable to diagnose it, and could only arrive at the general conclusion that it was a smell that brought with it very vivid recollections of a chemist's shop and of my old school laboratory. Wondering whence it originated, I thrust my face forward with the intention of trying to locate it, when, to my horror, my lips touched against something cold and flabby. In an agony of fear I reeled away from it, and, the bed being narrow, I slipped over the edge and bumped onto the floor. Now I think it is quite possible that up to this point you may have attributed my unhappy experience to nothing more nor less than a bad dream. But your dream theory can no longer hold good, for, on coming in such sudden contact with the floor, I gave my funny bone a knock, which, I can assure you, made me thoroughly awake. And the first thing I noticed on recovering my scattered senses was the smell. I sat up and saw to my terror my bed was occupied, but occupied in the most alarming manner. On the middle of the pillow was a face, the face of, I looked closer. I would have given every penny I possessed not to have done so, but I could not help myself. I looked closer, and it was the face of my brother Ralph. You may recollect my mentioning him to you, for he was the only one of us who was at that time making money, whom I believed to be in New York. He had always been rather sallow, but apart from the fact that he now looked very yellow, his appearance was quite natural. Indeed, as I gazed at him, I grew so convinced that it was he, that I cried out, "Ralph!" The moment I did so, there was a ghastly change. His eyelids opened, and his eyes I recognized at once, protruded to such a degree that they almost rolled out. His mouth flew open, his tongue swelled, his whole countenance became convulsed with the most unparalleled, and for that reason, indescribable expression of agony, whilst the yellowness of his complexion deepened to a livid, lurid black, that was so inconceivably repellent and hellish that I sprang away from the bed, appalled. There was then a gasping, rasping noise, and a voice that, despite its unnatural hollowness, I identified as that of Ralph, broke forth. "I've been wanting to speak to you for ages, but something I cannot explain has always prevented me. I have been dead a month, not cancer, but Dolly. Poison. Goodbye, Healy. I shall rest in peace now." The voice stopped. There was a rush of cold air, laden with the scent of the drug, and the faintly tainted, with the nauseating smell of the grave, and the face on the pillow vanished. How I got through the remainder of the night, I can't say. I dare not think. I dare only remember that I did not sleep. I was devoted to Ralph, and the thought that he had perished in the miserable manner suggested by the apparition completely prostrated me. In the morning, I received a black-edged letter from my mother stating that she had just heard from Dolly, my brother's wife, saying Ralph had died from cancer in the throat. Dolly added in a postscript that her dearly beloved Ralph had been very good to her and left her well provided for. Of course, we might have had the body exhumed, but we were poor, and Ralph's widow was rich, and in America, everything goes in favor of the dollars. Hence, we were obliged to let the matter drop, sincerely trusting Dolly would never take it into her head to visit us. She never did. My mother passed away last year. I felt her death terribly. And as I no longer have any fixed abode, but am always touring the British provinces, there is not much fear of Ralph's murderess and I meeting. It is rather odd, however, that after my own experience at the hotel, I heard that it had borne the reputation for being haunted for many years, and that a good many visitors who had passed the night in one of the rooms, presumably mine, had complained of hearing strange noises and having dreadful dreams. How can one explain it all? One can't, I responded. And then we turned in for the night. Okay. Next case, the Grey Piper and the Heavy Coach of Donald de Gallery House, Perth. I hope I said that. Donald de Gallery, with an R, de Gallery House in Perth. We'll just go with that. Donald Gallery House, until comparatively recent times, stood on the outskirts of Perth. It was a long, low, rambling old place, dating back to the beginning of the 17th century. At the time of the narrative, it was in the possession of a Mr. William Whittington, who bought it at a very low price from some people named Tyler. It is true that it would cost a small fortune to repair, but notwithstanding this disadvantage, Mr. Whittington considered his purchase a bargain, and was more than satisfied with it. Indeed, he knew of no other house of a similar size, of such an imposing appearance, and so pleasantly situated, that he could have bought for less than twice the amount he had paid for this. And he was really very sorry for the Tylers, who explained to him in confidence that had they not been in such urgent need of money, they would never have sold the house at such a ridiculously low figure. However, with them it was a question of cash down, and Mr. Whittington had only to write out a check for the modest sum they asked, and the house was his. It was June when Mr. Whittington took possession of the house. June, when the summer sun was brightest and the gardens looked their best. The Whittington family, consisting of Mr. and Mrs. Whittington, 2 sons, Ernest and Harvey, and 3 daughters, Ruth, Martha, and Mary, were, as one might gather from their names, alone, plain, practical, genteel, and in fact very superior people, who were by no means lacking and that exceedingly useful quality of, of, of candidness, so characteristic of the Lowland Scot, to which race they belonged. Mr. Whittington had, for years, conducted a grocery business in Jedburgh, twice filling the honored and coveted post of mayor. And when he at length retired into private life, his friends, and it was astonishing how many he had, shrewdly suspected that his pockets were not only well lined, but full to bursting. Acting on the advice of his wife and daughters, who were keen on social distinction, he sent Ernest to Oxford, conditionally that he should take holy orders in the Church of England. Willis Harvey, who was scarcely out of the petticoat stage, displayed the regular Whittington talent for business by covertly helping himself to the sugar in his father's shop, and disposing of it at strictly sale price to his sister's cronies in the nursery, was sent to one of those half preparatory and half finishing schools, of course, for the sons of gentlemen only. At Edinburgh, where he was kept till he was old enough to be articled, and to a prosperous, exceedingly prosperous firm of solicitors. The girls, Ruth, Martha, and Mary, had likewise been highly educated. That is to say, they had remained so many years at English seminary for young ladies, and had been given a final 12 months in France and Germany to enable them to obtain the correct accent. At the time of the story, they were as yet unmarried, and were awaiting with the most laudable patience the advent of the man of title. They were delighted with their new home, which Ruth had persuaded her father to christen Donald Galwerie. I'm having trouble with the Gowrie. Galwerie, Donald Galwerie, after the house in a romantic novel she had just been reading. And, proud of their gilded premises and magnificent tennis lawns, they had placed a gigantic and costly tray in the hall, in confident assurance that it would speedily groan beneath the weight of the cards from old gentry in Perthshire. But please be it understood that my one and only object alluding to these trifling details is to point out that the Whittingtons, being entirely engrossed in matters mundane, were the very last people in the world to be termed superstitious, and although imaginative where future husbands' calls and cards were concerned, prior to the events about to be narrated, had not an ounce of superstition in their natures. Indeed, until then they had always smiled in a very supercilious manner at even the smallest mention of a ghost. September came, their first September in the house, and the family welcomed with joy Ernest and his youthful bride. The latter was not, as they had fondly hoped and roundly announced in the Perth, the daughter of a peer, but of a wealthy Bristol draper, the owner of a house near the Downs, whose son had been one of Ernest's many friends at Oxford. The coming of the newly married pair to the house brought with it a burst of bird-like gaiety, all sorts of entertainments, musical at homes, dinners, dances, tennis, and garden parties. In fact, every variety that accorded with the family's idea of good taste were given, and with praiseworthy push for which the Whittingtons had fast become noted. All of the county was invited. This splendid display of wealth and hospitality was not disinterested. I fear it might be not only accounted a send-off for the immaculately clad curate and his wife, but also a determined effort on the part of Mr. and Mrs. Whittington to attract the right sort of lover for their girls. It was during the progress of one of their al fresco entertainments that the skepticism of certain of the Whittingtons with regard to the supernatural received a rude blow. Martha, Mary, and two eligible young men, friends of the Harveys, having finished a somewhat spirited game of croquet, were refreshing themselves with lemonade, whilst they continued their flirtation. Presently, Mary, whose partner declared how much he should like to see some photographs that she had recently had taken of herself, with a well-affected giggle of embarrassment, sent off to the house to fetch her album. The minutes passed, and as she did not return, Martha went in search of her. The album, she knew, was in their bedroom, which was situated at the end of the long and rather gloomy corridor of the upper story. Highly incensed at her sister's slowness, she was hastening along the corridor, when, to her supreme astonishment, she suddenly saw the figure of a man in kilts, with a bagpipe under his arm, emerge through the half-open door of the bedroom, and with a peculiar gliding motion advanced towards her. A curious feeling with which she was totally unfamiliar compelled her to remain mute and motionless, and in this condition she awaited the approach of the stranger. Who was he? She asked herself. And how on earth had he got there? And what was he doing? As he drew nearer, she perceived that his face was all one hue, a ghastly livid gray, and that his eyes, which were all the time fixed on hers, were lurid and menacing. So terrible, in fact, that she turned cold with fear, and felt the very hair on her head beginning to rise on end. She opened her mouth to shriek, but found she could not ejaculate a syllable. Neither could she, even with the most desperate efforts, tear her feet from the floor. On came the figure, and without swerving either to the right or left, it glided right up to and through her, and, as she involuntarily turned round, she saw it disappear through a half-open staircase window, at least 20 feet above the ground outside. Shaking all over with terror, and not understanding in the slightest of what to make of it, Martha ran to the bedroom, where her heart almost sprang out of her body at the spectacle of her sister, Mary, stretched at full length on the floor, her cheeks ashy pale, her lips blue. Martha at once made a frantic rush to the bell, and, in a few minutes, half the establishment, headed by Mr. Whittington, poured into the room. With the aid of a little cold water, Mary speedily recovered, and, in reply to the anxious inquiries of her sympathetic rescuers as to what had happened, indignantly demanded why such a horrible-looking creature as that Piper had been allowed not merely to enter the house, but to come up to her room, and half frighten her to death. I had just got my album, she added, when, feeling someone was in the room, I turned round, and there, she indicated a spot on the carpet, was the Piper, not 10 paces away from me, regarding me with the most awful look imaginable. I was too taken aback with surprise to say anything, nor, for some unaccountable reason, could I escape before he touched me on the shoulder with one of his icy cold hands, and then commenced playing. Up and down the floor he paced, backwards and forwards, never taking his hateful glance off my face, and ever piping the same dismal dirge. At last, unable to stand the strain of it any longer, and convinced he was a madman, bent on murdering me, for who but a lunatic would behave in such a way, I gave way to a violent fit of hysterics, and fainted. Now tell me who he was, and why he was permitted to frighten me in this manner. And Mary stamped her feet and grew vicious, as only her class will when they are all vexed. Her speech was followed by a silence that exasperated her. She repeated her inquiries with crimson cheeks, and then, as again no one responded, she signaled out the head footman and raved at him. Up to this point, Mr. Whittington had been dumb with amazement. The idea of a strange Piper having the twofold effrontery to enter his house and proceed to the private and chaste sanctuary of his highly respectable daughters almost deprived him of breath. He could scarcely believe his ears. What in the name of what does it all mean? He at length stammered, addressing the unfortunate footman. A Piper, and without any invitation from me. How dare you let him in? I did not, sir, the luckless footman replied. No such person came to the door when I was in the hall. No more he did when I was there, chimed in the second footman, and all the other servants vociferated in a body. We never saw any Piper, sir, nor heard one either. And they looked at Mary. At this, Mr. Whittington looked exceedingly embarrassed. In the face of such a unanimous denial, what could he say? He knew that if he suggested the servants were untruthful, they would all give notice to leave on the spot. And knowing good servants are scarce in Perth, as elsewhere, he felt rather in a fix. At length, turning to Mary, he asked if she was sure it was a piper. Sure, Mary screamed. Why, of course I am. Did I not tell you he marched up and down here playing on his disgusting bagpipes, which nearly broke the drum of my ear? Excuse me. And I saw him too, Pa, Martha put in. I met him in the corridor. He had his pipes under his arm, and the most dreadful expression in his face. I don't wonder Mary was frightened. But where did he go? Mr. Whittington cried. You would not believe me if I told you, Martha said, her cheeks flushing. He seemed to pass right through me, and then to vanish through the staircase window. I have never been so terribly upset in my life. And, sinking onto the sofa, she began to laugh hysterically. Dear me, it's very odd, Mr. Whittington exclaimed, as Mary handed her sister a wine-glass. They can't both have been dreaming it. Must, but they're but a nonsensical notion. There are no such things as ghosts. Only children and nursemaids believe in them nowadays. As soon as you have quite recovered, my dears, we will return to the garden, and I think that under the rather peculiar circumstances, it will be better to say nothing to your mother. Do you understand? Mr. Whittington went on, eyeing the servants. Nothing to your mistress. The affair thus terminated, and for some days nothing further happened to disturb the peace of the family. At the end of a week, however, exactly a week after the appearance of the piper, Mary met with a serious accident. She was running across the croquet lawn to speak to her sister-in-law when she tripped over a hoop that had been accidentally left there, and, in falling, ran a hat-pin into her head. Ew! Blood poisoning ensued, and within a fortnight she was gone, unalived. Martha was the only one in the house, however, who associated Mary's accident and death with the piper. To her sinister expression in the mysterious Highlander's eyes, wait a minute, what happened here? Yeah, associated Mary's accident and death with the piper. To her, here we go, that sinister expression in the mysterious Highlander's eyes portended mischief, and she could not but suspect that in some way or another he had brought about the catastrophe. The autumn waned, and Christmas was well within sight, when another mysterious occurrence took place. It was early one Sunday evening, tea was just over, and the Whittington family were sitting around the fire, engaged in a somewhat melancholy conversation, for the loss of Mary had affected them all very deeply, when they heard the faraway rumble of a heavy coach on the high road. I just had a cramp, guys, I'm sorry. Oh, boy. Okay. Nearer and nearer it came, till it seemed to be about on a level with the front lodge gate. Then, to their surprise, there was a loud crunching of gravel, and they heard it careening at a breakneck speed up the carriage drive. They looked at one another in the utmost consternation. A coach, and driven in this mad fashion. Whose was it? What did it mean? Not visitors, surely. It pulled up at the front door, and the champing and stamping of the horses vibrated loudly through the still night air. Sounds as if one or more people descending were next heard. And then there came a series of most terrific knockings at the door. The Whittington family stared at one another aghast. There was something in those knockings, something they could not explain, that struck terror in their souls and made their blood run cold. They waited in breathless anxiety for the door to open, but no servant went to open it. The knocks were repeated, if anything louder than before. The door swung back on its hinges, and the tread of heavy footsteps were heard slowly approaching the drawing room. Mrs. Whittington gave a low gasp of horror. Ruth screamed. Harvey buried his face in his hands. Mr. Whittington rose to his feet and made desperate efforts to get to the bell, but could not stir, whilst Martha rushed to the drawing-room door and locked it. They then, with one accord, began to pray. The steps halted outside the room. The door slowly opened, and the blurred outlines of a group of ghastly-looking figures supporting a grotesquely shaped object in their midst appeared on the threshold. For some seconds there was a grim silence. It was abruptly broken by a thud. Ruth had slipped from her chair to the floor in a dead faint. Whereupon the shadowy forms solemnly veered round and made their way back again to the front door. The latter swung violently open. There was a rush of icy wind which swept like a hurricane across the hall and into the drawing room. The front door then slammed with a crash, and the coach drove away. Everyone's attention was now directed to Ruth. At first, sal volatile and cold water produced no effect, but after a time she slowly, very, very slowly, regained consciousness. As soon as she had recovered sufficiently to speak, she expressed an earnest desire that no reference should ever be made in her presence to what had just happened. It was for me, she said in such an emphatic tone as filled her audience with the direst forebodings. I know it was for me. They all looked in my direction. God help me, I shall die like Mary. Though greatly perplexed as to what she meant, for no one excepting herself had been able to make out the phenomenon with any degree of distinctness, they yielded to her entreaties and asked her no questions. The servants had neither heard nor seen anything. A fortnight later, Ruth was taken ill with appendicitis, speedily set in, and she died under the operation. The Whittingtons now began to wish they had never come to the house, but with the astuteness that had been characteristic of the family through the countless generations of fair days and foul, they took the greatest precautions never to drop even as much as a hint to the servants or to anyone in the town that the house was haunted. A year passed without any further catastrophe, and they were beginning to hope their ghastly visitors had left them when something else occurred. It was Easter time, and Ernest, his wife, and baby were staying with them. The baby, a boy, was fat and bonny, the very picture of health and happiness. Mrs. Whittington and Martha vied with one another in their devotion to him, and either one or the other of them was always dancing attendance on him. It so happened that one afternoon, whilst the servants were having their tea, Martha found herself alone in the upper part of the house with her precious nephew. Mr. Whittington had gone to Edinburgh to consult his lawyer, the head of the firm with whom Harvey was articled, on business, whilst Mrs. Whittington had taken her son and daughter-in-law for a drive. The weather was glorious, and Martha, though as little appreciative of the beauties of nature as most commercial-minded young women, could not but admire the coloring of the sky as she looked out of the nursery window. The sun had disappeared, but the effect of its rays was still apparent on the western horizon, where the heavens were washed with alternate streaks of gold and red and pink, the color of each streak, excessively brilliant in the center, but paling towards the edges. Here and there were golden pink-tipped clouds and crimson islets surrounded with seas of softest blue. And outside, the limits of this sun-kissed pale, the blue of the sky gradually grew darker and darker, until its line was altogether lost in the black shadows of night that, creeping over the lone mountain tops in the far east, slowly swept forward. Wafted by the gentle breeze came the dull moaning and whispering of the pine trees, the humming of the wind through the telephone wires, and the discordant cawing of the crows. And it seemed to Martha, as she sat there and peered out into the garden, that over the whole atmosphere of the place had come a subtle and hostile change, a change in the noises of the trees, the birds, the wind, a change in the flower-scented ether, a change, a most marked and emphatic change in the shadows. What was it? What was this change? Whence did it originate? What did it portend? A slight noise, a most trivial noise, attracted Martha's attention to the room. She looked round and was quite startled to see how dark it had grown. In the old days, when she had scoffed at ghosts, she would as soon have been in the dark as in the light. The night had no terrors for her, but now since those awful occurrences last year, all was different. and as she peered apprehensively about her, her flesh crawled. What was there in that corner, opposite? The corner hemmed in on the one side by the cupboard. How she hated cupboards, particularly when they had shiny surfaces on which were reflected all sorts of curious things, and the chest of drawers on the other. It was a shadow, only a shadow, but of what? She searched the room everywhere to find its material counterpart, and at last discovered it in the nurse's shawl, which hung over the back of the chair. Then she laughed, and would have gone on laughing, for she tried to persuade herself that laughter banished ghosts, when suddenly something else caught her eyes. What was it? An object that had glittered evilly, like two eyes. She got up in a state of the most hideous fascination, and walked towards it. Then she laughed again. It was a pair of scissors, the nurse's scissors, clean, bright, and sharp. Why did she pick them up and feel the blade so carelessly with her thumb? Why did she glance from them to the baby? Why? In the name of the God, why? Frightful ideas laid a hold of her mind. She tried to chase them away, but they quickly returned. The scissors, why they were in her fingers? Why could not she put them down? For what were they intended? Cutting thread and tape, and throats. Again, it's an old book, trust me. Throats, and she giggled hysterically at the bare notion. But what was this round her waist? This shadowy arm-like object? She looked fearfully round, and her soul died within her as she encountered the malevolent, gleeful eyes of the sinister piper pressed closely against her face. Was it she he wanted this time? She, or whom? In the name of all that was pitiable. Desperately, as if all the lives in the universe and the future of her soul were at stake, did she struggle to free herself from his grasp. But in vain. Every fiber, every muscle of her body was completed at his will. On and on he pushed her, until foot by foot, inch by inch, she approached the cradle. And all the while his hellish voice was breathing the vilest of inspirations into her brain. At last she stood by the side of the baby and bent over it. What a darling! What a dear! What a duck! A sweet, pretty, innocent, prattling duck. How like her mother! How like her handsome brother! How like herself! Very like herself! How everyone loved it! I got kicked. Yep, they discontinued me. Oh, that's it, I got banned. Oh no, it discontinued me, the activity. Let me get back on real quick, hang on. I thought maybe I got banned, so let me get back in there. I had 209 viewers too, so let me get in here so I can finish. Let me get back into TikTok. Can you give me a second? You guys, so let's go. Everybody was listening, so there's like, I was doing really well. Look at that. So give me a second, guys. Let me get back in here so I can finish this off for them. Give me a second, and I will be right there. Just give me a go back live. Okay, I'm just going to go back live. Okay, there we go. Let me get back in here. All right, guys, I apologize over on TikTok. Looks like you guys were listening, but there was no activity, so they shut the live down. So let's just continue so we can finish reading the book, okay? Part 2, just bear with me, everybody, and I just lost the page for the ghost stories. So give me a second. It's a Murphy's Law kind of gig, and I don't have anything coming up on my screen. Why is that? There we go. Come on. Okay, let me see. Okay, let me get back in here. Okay, here's where we left off. Alright. That's weird because I've never been kicked off that way. How like her handsome brother, how like herself, very like herself, how everyone loved it, how everyone worshipped it, how, and here the gray face beside her chuckled. Everyone would miss it. How pink its toes, how fat its calves, how chubby its little palms, how bonny its cheeks, and how white, how gloriously heavenly snowy white its throat. And she stretched forth one of her stubby and artistic fingers and played with its flesh. Then she glanced furtively at the scissors and smiled. Again, this is a book from the 1800s, so bear with me, you guys, okay? It was soon done, soon over, and she and the gray-faced piper danced a minuet in the moonbeams. Afterwards, he piped a farewell dirge, a wild, weird funeral dirge. And marching slowly backwards, his dark gleaming eyes fixed gloatingly on hers, disappeared through the window. Then the reaction set in, and Martha raved and shrieked till everyone in the house flew to the rescue. Of course, no one saving her father and mother believed her. Ernest, his wife, and the servants attributed her horrible act to jealousy, the law, to madness, and she subsequently journeyed from the house to a criminal lunatic asylum, where the recollection of all she had done soon killed her. This was the climax. Mr. Whittington sold the house, and a new house was shortly afterwards erected in its stead. Okay, that is it. And yeah, TikTok kicked me off. I apologize for that. You guys that were listening, for inactivity, because everybody was listening, but they weren't, doing anything physically. So let's remember we got to keep the activity going. Okay, so I want to thank everybody for coming today. I really appreciate it. We will continue with this book next weekend, and it'll be next Sunday. I'll do another read, and the next chapter will be coming up. And to give you guys a heads up on the chapter, we're looking at the floating head of the Benracket Inn. So we're going to be doing that one. Then we'll continue. But I want to thank everybody for coming. And again, I apologize on TikTok. I've never been kicked out before. That was I thought at first somebody had called the TikTok police on me there for a second. I thought, oh boy, we're banned for the next 7 to 8 days, but we're not. So I want to thank you all. Tomorrow, again, we are going to be back at 6:30 p.m. Pacific with our regular show. We're going to get into our paranormal. Well, it's going to be a different kind of week. We're going to have some paranormal, and we're not going to have some paranormal. So tomorrow is Mark Danatorio coming on, and we're going to be talking about the night sky and what can be seen even with basic binoculars. It's interesting, this time of year, what you can see, especially depending on where you're located. So he'll be here at 6:30 p.m. Pacific tomorrow. But I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate it, and I know it's a beautiful Sunday night. Everybody's out doing things and busy, busy, busy. And isn't next week's Mother's Day, right, for the United States? So we might do this Saturday instead of Sunday because of Mother's Day. But anyway, I want to thank you all for coming. And again, TikTok, you guys can find me nightly, Monday through Friday, at youtube.com/@CaliforniaHauntsRadio, 6:30 p.m. Pacific every night. That's where I do my we do the main show. Okay, I really appreciate you guys coming on. So with that being said, I'm going to release you guys and let TikTok go, and then I'm going to do my closing on my regular internet feed, and that'll be the end of that until tomorrow. So let me close you out. Have a great night, TikTok. Okay, so that being said, we ended up, I'm looking at the TikTok figures, and I had 200, I think I said 209 when TikTok closed me off, and just in that 5-minute round, I had 74 listening. So I do have people coming back to listen, so I'm starting to build up over on TikTok. I want to apologize for that freeze up. It's interesting because I just got new internet. I just got a faster internet system put in. And this time of day, because everybody, again, in this neighborhood has Xfinity, it slows my internet down immensely. Because I average normally, when I'm not at peak times, we're at 200 mLbps, which is blazing speed. It slows down to 44 mLbps out here. So, it's just getting choked, and it's not Xfinity doing it, it's the neighborhood as a whole that's slowing it down. So I'm going to try and get some more boosters to handle that, but that's going to be further down the line. Thanks, everybody, for coming tonight, taking time out of your Sunday. Again, I have a ticker running on the bottom because my bills are coming due. I almost couldn't do this show tonight because my backup hard drive is full. So I had to buy another backup hard drive online, so that took my bill money. So if you guys could help me out, I'd really appreciate it. In fact, the first thing due is my internet bill, which is due on Thursday. And if I don't get it paid, obviously there won't be internet, there won't be a show. So if you guys could find it in your heart to help me out, even with $5, that would be great. The addresses are right there for Venmo and PayPal on the bottom. that would be a great, great help because I'm looking for about $100 to get things paid this week. So I really appreciate it. But thank you all for coming tonight. I will see you tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. with the nice guy, with Mark Denotorio. It's going to be a great thing, and I think you guys will like it. A little different than what you're used to. Thank you for coming, Marisa. Thank you, Debbie, for the like. And please do hit that like button because we do want to keep this sharing. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. Equal opportunity. All right, guys, I'll see you tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. And let me cue my thingy up here. I'll lose my thingy. Have a great rest of your evening. Have a great rest of your evening. So my cues aren't working. Well,